طيب. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So tonight, inshallah, we're going to deal with the issue of the women visiting the graves, the graveyards. And this is a completion or one of the issues that is found in Kitab al-Janaiz, the book of the Janaiz, the funeral prayers. We finished that not last week, not last Friday. We finished that chapter the Friday before that. I was a hit that silver button, please. There's only one. The silver one. No, in front of you. Yeah. You know where it's at? La. Hit the silver now. Okay. Silver. La, right there. This one here? Yeah. That's all. That's. Hey, خلاص. Hey, خلاص. خلاص. طيب. This is a completion or one issue from the issues from Kitab al-Janaiz, the book of funeral prayers. And this issue came at the end of the book, but again, the book is summarized, so there wasn't much detail surrounding the issue. But it's worth us looking at the issue in some detail, because this is one of those issues, at least for us, that if we see this issue, we like some people, it becomes an issue of division. Right? This is a reason that people say that, for example, they're not going to pray at such a place. They're not going to deal with these people. These Muslims are not really practicing Islam correctly, based on what? They go to a janazah. Once we get to the graveyard, there's women there. And what's the ruling on women going to the janazah, to the graveyard, y'all? Right? As far as the person knows, women shouldn't be at the graveyard. Right? So that issue is in itself it's not a black and white issue. It's not an issue that all of the scholars of Islam agree upon. It's not ijma' issue, meaning there are differences. The scholars of Islam differ on the permissibility of women following the janazah to the graveyard. And that's what we're discussing tonight, inshallah ta'ala. But this is not your normal, this is not a normal class like the other classes we usually have. This has detail to it. This is an academic study of the issue. So this is not something that's like, yeah, inshallah. It's not something that's our normal class on Monday, Wednesday. This is an academic study. This is a bahth, actually. This is a research. This is a portion of a research paper. And inside of this, it's not really stretched out like it could be. It can go even deeper. There's some things that are left out of this. So what's going to happen is we're going to see the way that the scholars of Islam discuss issues that include difference of opinion. When scholars differ, what does that mean? Because we hear it a lot. There's more than one opinion. Some say this, some say that, but this is going to show us, inshallah, this will give us a glance at what it looks like behind, I don't know, say closed doors, behind all the layers. When you peel all the layers back and you really get to the meat and potatoes, it's these type of interactions with scholars that bring forth the final ruling from a particular sheikh. Meaning, you read one book, they say the women shouldn't go to there is not allowed, haram. You read another book, they say something else. You read another book, this sheikh says it's sunnah, this sheikh says it's haram, this one says it's something like that. Based on what? It's not based on what country they're from. When scholars, their opinion is not based on, this one is from Africa, so he says this. This one is from Saudi, so he says this. This one is from Lebanon, so he says this. Based on the dalil in front of them. Now, as we're going to see, Because somebody has dalil, a text from the Quran or the Sunnah, it doesn't necessitate that that ayat means what they think it means. It doesn't necessitate that everybody agrees on the meaning of that ayat in that case or the hadith. So we'll start, inshallah. And this is under the chapter زيارة النساء للقبور. Women visiting the graves. اتفق العلماء على استحباب زيارة الرجال للمقابر. The scholars agree on the recommendation of the men. There's no difference in the men, y'all. The men visiting the graves, this is something that is recommended. The issue comes in, واختلفوا في حكم ذلك للنساء. The issue comes in, the scholars differ. And what? If the women should visit the graves. Number one, so that we know what we're talking about, so that we're not confused. We're not talking about men visiting the graves. We're talking about women visiting the graves. طيب. He says, أقوال العلماء في المسألة. The scholars differ. اختلف العلماء في حكم زيارة النساء للقبور على ثلاثة. There are three different opinions. Three different opinions on if the women are allowed Islamically to visit the graveyard or not. Clear? Not one opinion. Three opinions. Now the question always comes, which one is the strongest though? People want to cut the chase and say, all right, so which one's the strongest? What's the strongest? What the Sheikh such and such said? Well, it don't matter. If Sheikh such and such is going to go back to the three opinions. It ain't like the scholars that we know and love, whatever their names are. It don't make a difference what their name is. The scholars that we know and love, it's not like they make up stuff. They don't just shoot from the hip and come with something because they are who we hold them to be. That it all has to go back to text, dalil. So, sit down until I catch you. The first opinion, as he says, al-qawl al-awwal, the first opinion is that ibahatu ziyarat al-nisa lil-qubur, the permissibility of women visiting the graves. This is the first opinion. The famous opinion in our area is what? That they shouldn't? What does that mean? Shouldn't. Forbidden. Haram. That's famous to a lot of us in our area. That it's haram for the women to visit the graves. That means what happens when brothers go to the graveyard and they see women there? They start, right? Oh man, it's innovative. This is bid'ah from the rip, bid'ah. They'll come or they start directing traffic, right? All the women go back over there and they start screaming at the family and screaming at people, right? Huh? Sheikh, where they come from? Yo, we gotta come back to that, man. Maru'a. What they gotta do with this? Connect that for me. Okay. Okay. So how do you connect that to this? Oh, yeah. Muru'as, that's not good. We can deal with that though, but that wouldn't apply here. That's not going to apply here. Tell you, the first opinion is what? It's permissible for the women to visit the graves. Now, whose position is this? Who says this? He says, وَهَذَا قَوْلُ الْحَنِيفِيَّةِ. قَوْلُ الْحَنِيفِيَّةِ. The Hanifiyya, the Ahnaf, are those who follow the madhab of Imam Abu Hanifa. Imam Abu Hanifa, the famous Imam, the madhab of Hanafi, right? Everybody with me? We know the four madhab, the famous ones. Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi'i, and Imam Ahmad. طيب. He says this is the position of the Ahnaf, the scholars of the Hanafi fiqh. That what? What's the position? That it's permissible for women to visit the graveyards. طيب. He says, well, بعض المالكية. Some of the Maliki scholars also allow for women to visit the graveyards, but this is not the Maliki position. Clear? It's the position of who? Abu Hanifa, the madhab of Abu Hanifa, Imam Abu Hanifa. طيب. He says, وَقَوْلُ بَعْض, and some of the Malikiya hold that it's allowed for women to visit the graves. He says, وَالشَّافِعِيَّةِ عِنْدَ الْأَمَنِ الْفِتْنَةِ, and the scholars of the Shafi'i madhab allow it if, they say if with a condition, if it's safe from any fitna. It doesn't describe what fitna is here. It doesn't describe what fitna is, but that's the condition that they put on it. وَهُوَ الرِّوَايَةِ عِنْدَ الْحَنَابِلَةِ, and it is also a riwayah with the scholars of the method of Imam Ahmed. It's a nuskha in there. It's a nuskha in there. Yeah. Yeah. It's a nuskha on top of the printer. طيب. Now, it's not, so far we already know that what? It's more than one scholar, y'all. This is not one scholar said it's permissible. All right? This is not one scholar said it's okay to go. No, no, no. This is a whole madhab of the Ahnaf, the scholars of the Hanafi madhab, and scholars from the Maliki madhab, and scholars, so all from the madhab, there's a statement that it's permissible for them to go. Okay? Does that make it okay? Does that make it okay for women to go to the grave because we have a statement from them just like that? What do they need? They need dalil. Now they move to the dalil. What's the dalil? Ashab hada qawbi adilla. They have adilla. They don't have one piece of dalil. They have numerous pieces of evidence to prove Islamically that it's okay for women to go to the grave. طيب. So now they bring their dalil. Their first dalil is the hadith of Buraidah رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إني كنت نهيتكم عن زيارة القبور فزوروها. That the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said in a hadith, and this hadith is in Sahih Muslim. This hadith is in Sahih Muslim. Now what are they doing? They're bringing a proof to prove what? It's allowed, that Islam allows women to go to the graveyards. There's janazas every day, all the time, right? Posters going up, come get a brother's rights. Now we get to the issue of when it's time to go bury to the grave, can the women go or not? These group of scholars say they can, and this is how they prove it Islamic. First, the Prophet ﷺ, the hadith says that the Prophet ﷺ, he said, I used to prevent you from going to the graves, right? And then he said, fazuruha, but now he's commanding them to go visit. Clear? I used to prevent you from visiting the graves, but go visit them now. Everybody with me? Clear? طيب. That's the first hadith. He says, وحديث أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه زار رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قبر أمه فبكى وأبكى من حوله. That the Prophet ﷺ, he visited the grave of his mother, alayhi salatu wasalam. He cried when he visited her grave, and the people around him cried also. He says, then the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said, استأذنت ربي في أن أستغفر لها فلم يؤذن لي. He said, I asked Allah to give me permission to seek for his forgiveness for her, for his mother. That was it. And I wasn't given permission. He said, and I asked permission, and azura qabraha fa'adhina li. And I asked permission to visit her grave, and I was given permission to visit her grave. He wasn't given permission to do what? Make dua for her, make istighfar, seek Allah's forgiveness for her. Tayyib. He said, but I asked permission to visit her grave, and I was granted permission to visit her grave. Then he said, فَزُورُوا الْقُبُورِ فَإِنَّهَا تُذَكِّرُ الْمَوْتِ. Then he said again, so visit the graves. This is a command from the Prophet. Visit the graves, because visiting the graves will remind you of death. طيب. What the scholars of Islam do is after that, that still isn't enough. How do you prove that that hadith means that women can visit the grave? He never what? Specify what? Oh.
It was a general.
J. He never specified who could visit the graves. He left it general. He just said visit the graves. That's what you're saying? This is called the wajh al-istidlal. Meaning, we can all say something, and we can all pull an ayat or a hadith. But you have to prove that whatever we talk about, that ayat or hadith proves that. What in the ayat or what in the hadith proves that? Clear? What in the hadith proves that women are allowed to visit the graves, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the permissibility of women visiting the graves. And then they brought two hadith. Both hadiths said that the Prophet ﷺ used to prevent you from visiting the graves. Then he said what? Visit them. Who is he telling to visit them? The Muslims. Is it general men, women? It didn't specify, right? So what they say is his statement, fazuruha, that statement to say where he says visit the graves, they say that this love is am. This is a general love. This is a general statement from the Prophet ﷺ, right? Yadkhulu fihi ar-rijal wa nisa. That who enters into that generality? Men and women. The Prophet ﷺ said, I used to prevent you. Then he said, fazuruha. He commanded the Sahaba to visit the graves. And of course, that command is for the Ummah. And they say that it's general. It doesn't specify, I commanded only the men to visit the graves. It says, I commanded you to visit the graves. Tayyib. He said also, the first prohibition was am. The first prohibition of visiting the grave was also general. Where's the first prohibition in the hadith? There you are. The Prophet ﷺ said, I used to prevent you from visiting the graves. Who's the you? Everybody. It doesn't say just the men, doesn't say just the women. Clear? It was am. Tayyib. So the prohibition in the beginning was general. I used to prevent you from visiting the graves. And then the command to visit the graves that came after that was general. And that's what they say. That's how that hadith proves that it's allowed for our sisters to visit the graves. Clear? Questions? Sisters, you with me? Inshallah. Tayyib. This is what happens, y'all. At this point, because do all the scholars agree on that? No. So what do the scholars do? They come and they argue that. They argue what? They don't argue the dalil because the hadith are authentic. They're in Sahih Muslim. The first was in Sahih Muslim, and the second one is in Sahih Muslim. All right? So they're not arguing, is the hadith authentic? They're arguing the hadith doesn't prove what you're saying it proves. The hadith is not general. You're saying it's general and it includes everybody, right? That's what they said, right? They're saying, no, it's not general. And it doesn't include everybody. Clear? What are they arguing? They're not arguing if the hadith is authentic or not. They're arguing the wedge, the angle, the proof. How do you prove this hadith means that? And they said what? They said it's general. It includes everybody, and this is why it includes the women. Clear? Tayyib. Now, the other scholars are going to argue. Tayyib. And they say they have three arguments against this. They have three arguments against this. Tayyib. The first argument, no doubt. I can say that. The first argument is the argument against what, y'all? Huh? What are we arguing? What are the scholars going to argue against? Whether it's general. And the fact that it's general is not the hadith itself. It's what does the hadith mean? They're arguing the meaning of the hadith. Because the authenticity of the hadith is not the argument there. It's in Sahih Muslim. We're not arguing about that. But does it mean what it says they mean? They said it was general. Tayyib? Tayyib. Oh, well, Shay, they say what? The first thing they do is say, we don't agree with you. The fact that the women enter into that generality. We don't agree with that. Everybody with me? We don't agree with that. That's the first thing. You're trying to prove that the hadith means that women are included based on what? You're saying based on the wording and that the wording is general. We disagree. We don't believe that. We don't agree that the wording is general, that it includes the women. And they say, why? They says, وَذَلِكَ لِأَنَّ الصِّيغَةَ فَزُورُوهَا فَزُورُوا الْقُبُورَ صِيغَةَ تَذْكِيرٍ. They say, why? Because in Arabic, both of the two terms, the words used in the hadith, where the Prophet ﷺ said, visit the graves, though they are both masculine phrases in the Arabic language. Everybody with me? It's a masculine way that the Prophet ﷺ commanded the people to visit the graves. He used a masculine term. If we don't know, in Arabic, we have masculine words and we have feminine words. So it has to, basically, you have to, if you're talking to a female, you use a certain line of wording. If you're talking to a male, you use the masculine line of wording. In this case, the Prophet ﷺ used the masculine line of wording. So how are you going to say, this is their argument, how are y'all going to say that it's general and includes women when he used the masculine line of wording? Clear? Everybody with me? Clear so far? Like, this is their argument. And they say that that masculine line of wording, originally, the asl of it is that it doesn't include women, right? In Arabic, you have masculine pronouns, you have feminine pronouns, right? You don't talk to a woman using masculine pronouns, and you don't talk to a man using feminine pronouns. Clear? This is the idea here. They're saying that that wording, both of them, both of the words in both of those hadiths that are both in Sahih Muslim and they're both authentic, both of those terms are used in a masculine sense. So how do you, scholars, no disrespect, but how do you scholars include women in something where the Prophet ﷺ used a masculine term? Clear? Saajid. Stop right there for that. You saw that? Saajid. Clear? Everybody clear so far? I'm gonna make sure we're clear because this is important. This is how we get to the point where the scholars differ. The scholars don't just wake up and differ and then everybody can run off and do what they want. No, it's academic. It's dalil. We have dalil from Sahih Muslim and this is what it means. The other group of scholars say, la, that's in Sahih Muslim, but it doesn't mean that. Why doesn't it mean that? How are you going to tell me it doesn't mean that? Because the wording is masculine. And then how do you include the women, the females in masculine wording? The original meaning of that word is a masculine word. You can't just include them like that. So yeah, that's the first way they argue those two hadith. That's only one way. That's only one argument on both of those hadith. Clear?
So the issue is that I think that you first mentioned that's the story by us.
Yes.
Scholars are going against that disability argument.
Yes. Clear? We hear y'all? Gotta make sure we gotta, every argument we doing right now, every piece of dalil, hadith, is to prove that it's okay, it's allowed for women to visit the graves. We're not talking about nothing else. All we're talking about is, are women allowed to visit the graves? And some scholars say yes, and this is how they prove it. How do they prove it? The first two hadiths that they mentioned, the Prophet ﷺ said what? I used to prevent you from visiting the graves. Then he said, Fazuruha. Then he said, but visit them now. And then the other one, when he visited his mother's grave, he was crying, right? And he said, I asked Allah to allow me to visit her grave, and Allah gave me permission. Then he told the people, visit the graves because it will remind you of death, right? In both of those hadith, he said, visit the graves. That was the command from the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That command is considered to be general. So that includes, if it's general, it includes men and women. That's what they say. So yeah, the other scholars are arguing, y'all. And this is their first argument. And they have more arguments. Their first argument is what? That wording that he said when he told the Muslims to visit the graves was a masculine wording. And you cannot use, how do you just use and include females inside of a masculine word? When the origin of that wording is for males. So how do y'all just going to include the females in that? Clear? Let's move to the next one. Yes, that's why I told them to summarize from the beginning. Even that argument, they could have argued back. Yes, I think they might mention that later. They're going to mention that later.
Yeah.
But either way, again, as long as this is, it may seem like it's academic and it's summarized. This is summarized, y'all. This is not even the full, because we could still go back and forth. But at the end of the going back and forth, we're not screaming at each other and calling each other names, and kicking each other out the house, and not praying with each other no more and cutting people off, unfollowing you on the John. What's the name? Had to unfollow for that. Allah Musta'an. Now they're going to argue the same hadith. That's the first way that they argue against it. Their second argument against it is under the first opinion. We said there was three opinions, right? This is the first opinion, is that it's permissible for women to visit the graves. And that is their proof. Go ahead.
The argument is considered under the first opinion?
Yes.
Or is that
All of this is the first opinion. So what happens? Basically, it's a line of back and forth debate. You say it's permissible. You bring your dalil. Cool. They say, and then you don't just bring your dalil, you bring your what? Your wedge, your angle of proof. How does your dalil prove what you're saying? Clear? That's important. Now, what happens? The other scholars come and they read your work. They say, wait a minute. Okay, you're saying based on what? They read your hadith. Yeah, but the hadith doesn't mean that. That's not what the hadith means. What does the hadith mean? How can you say the hadith is general when you use a masculine term? How do you involve women when it's a masculine term used?
so the argument with first proof, it's not to say that they have an opposite proof. They're just saying they're trying to disprove your.
Yes, I'm disproving what you're saying. I'm not even trying to prove anything, but what you're saying is not right. Clear? We didn't get to my proof yet. I'm just arguing against your proof. Clear? And this is summarized. They stop right there, but we can go, they could go further. There's more to be said, but we'll leave it there. طيب. The reason, y'all, some of these, they make sense in Arabic, according to the language, but in English, it's going to be like, what is he talking about? Some of them. And that's the benefit of knowing Arabic. A lot of times, there's a whole section in Usul al-Fiqh called Dalalat al-Alfaz. It's connected to the Arabic language. And to translate that is kind of difficult. It might miss the mark of what we're trying to do. So this second way that they argue, they have three ways to argue their first two hadiths. That was just the first one. The second way is connected to the fact that they say it's general, but it's a little lugawi. It's a little connected to the language a lot, so we may not do that. But they have another one. This is the other way they argue it. Again, what are they arguing? We got to make sure we know we're arguing. Don't get lost on what we're arguing. Yeah. Yes, they're arguing that those two hadith that are where? In Sahih Muslim. They're arguing those two hadith that y'all brought from Sahih Muslim. They're arguing that they don't mean what you said they mean. We know they're authentic, but we don't agree as scholars. We're not talking about men. These are scholars. We don't agree that the meaning holds the meaning that you hold. And the meaning that you hold, that they hold, is what? It's general, and if it's general, it includes men and women. That's what they hold. And they're saying that, no, we don't agree with that. Based on, that was one issue, and now here's another issue. They say, if the women were included, they said, if the women were included in that wording, if they were included, then it would be recommended and encouraged for the women to visit the graves, just like it's encouraged for the men to visit the graves. Right? He says, فَإِنَّ النَّبِيَّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ عَلَّلَ الْأَمْرَ بِالزِّيَارَةِ بِعِلَّةٍ تَقْتَضِي إِسْتِحْبَابٍ وَهِيَ قَوْلُهُ فَإِنَّهَا تُذَكِّرُ الْمَوْتِ. He said, why? The Prophet ﷺ said in one of those hadith, he said at the end, what? Visit the graves because it does what? It reminds you of death. So he mentioned a reason, right, that it will be recommended for visiting the graves. That is a reminder of death. That should be for, or is the reminder of death just for men? For everybody. He says, so if the women were included, then it will be recommended for them to visit the graves based on that reason. The reason of visiting the graves is what? It's a reminder for death. The death is only a reminder to the men. Last, a reminder to everybody. He says, وَلَا يُوجَدْ مَنْ مِنَ الْأَئِمَّةِ مَنْ اسْتَحَبَّ لِلنِّسَاءِ زِيَارَةُ الْقُبُورِ. You don't find any of the imams saying that it's recommended for the women to go. Saying that it's recommended. These group of scholars are saying that it's what? Allowed. If they go, they go. If they don't, they don't. He said, but you don't find any of the imams saying it's recommended to go. Clear? Huh? There's a difference between being recommended and just saying allowed. If something is recommended, if something is sunnah, then, right, there's some reward connected to it. If something is just allowed, it's not necessarily any reward or any punishment connected to it. Clear? Everybody with me? Huh? He says, وَلَا كَانَ النِّسَاء عَلَى عَهْدِ النَّبِيِّ عَلَيْهِ الصَّلَاةُ وَالسَّلَامُ وَالْخُلَفَاءِ الرَّاشِدِينَ يَخْرِجْنَ إِلَى زِيَارَةِ الْقُبُورِ كَمَا يَخْرِجُ الرِّجَالُ. He said, you didn't find the women. This is their argument, y'all. Understand this. Understand this, y'all. You gotta understand this good. Because this is a debate. This is a debate. Because I say something doesn't necessarily mean it's true. That's true, right? In the debate, it's part of the debate. Huh? It's part of mantiq. Just because I say something don't necessarily mean I'm accurate when I say it. So they say what? They say the women during the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the four Khulafa al-Rashidin, the Khalifas, they didn't go out to the graveyards like the men did, and they stopped right there. That's their argument. Is it strong to you? Is it not strong to you? That's not what we here for specifically, right? You might hear something like it was a brother here before when we started. He said that it's haram for the women. He believed it was impermissible for women to go to the grave. When we got done this one, and the second one, and he heard the actual dalil for those who say that it's not allowed for women to visit the grave, he said that theirs wasn't as strong. His position changed on it based on hearing everything. The next proof to say it is allowed for our sisters to go to the graveyard when we have a janazah, to these scholars, are the hadith of Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu. قال مر النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بامرأة تبكي على قبر. He walked past a woman and she was sitting by the grave crying. فقال لها اتق الله واصبري. He said, the Prophet said to the woman that was doing what? Crying. Where was she? Sitting next to a grave crying. He said, fear Allah. He told her to fear Allah and be patient. Fear Allah and be patient. She said, قالت إليك عني فإنك لم تصيب بمصيبتي. She turns around and says to the Prophet ﷺ, like, leave me alone. That's nice. Get away from me. She said, like, you're not going through what I'm going through. You haven't been tested what I'm being tested with the death of the person. At the time, the woman, وَلَمْ تَعْرِفُ, she didn't know that she was talking to the Prophet ﷺ. Everybody with me? She didn't know that was the Messenger ﷺ that told her to do what? Fear Allah and be patient. Because she was sitting by a grave crying. فَقِيلَ لَهَا إِنَّهُ النَّبِيُّ. So somebody told her that was the Prophet ﷺ you were talking to. فَأَتَتْ بَابَ النَّبِيِّ عَلَيْهِ الصَّلَاةُ وَالسَّلَامُ فَلَمْ تَجِدْ عِنْدَهُ بَوَّابِينَ. So she went to the Prophet ﷺ's house, wherever he was, and she didn't find anybody guarding the door or anything. She went straight to his house. Once she found out who she was speaking to, she went to him. And she didn't find any guards at the door. فَقَالَتْ لَمْ أَعْرِفْكَ. She said, I didn't know that was you. That's what she said to the Prophet. I didn't know that was you. فَقَالَ إِنَّمَا الصَّبْرُ عِنْدَ الصَّدْمَةِ الْأُولَى. And we all know this part of the hadith, that patience is at the beginning of the trial. When the trial first hits you, when you first go through something, when you first hear about something, that's when you got to be patient. That's when you show your patience. So now, that's the hadith. The hadith is in Sahih al-Bukhari, right? So we're not arguing if the hadith is authentic, but they brought their hadith that's authentic, is in Sahih al-Bukhari, and now they're going to tell you, how does that hadith prove that it's okay for women to go to the grave? Anybody? Probably yes.
He never told her that she could leave it. He said fear Allah and patient.
Jade. He says no. What you gonna say?
I won't counter that.
Papa, he gonna Mashayah.
The hadith about the Prophet left the graveyard after she was without further argument with her.
Right.
She went back to
G. So, all right. I mean, sisters, you got any input on this? Huh? This is for y'all. I mean, it's for the brothers too, but it's important for the sisters to understand what's going on. Yeah. Any questions, sisters, so far? Y'all with me? Like, now they get ready to give what? They already gave the hadith that is authentic. It's inside Al-Bukhari. We're not arguing that. So now they're going to say, how does this hadith prove that it's okay for our sisters to go to the graveyard? They say the wajh al-istidlal. What in this hadith proves that it's okay? Where does it show it's okay? It says, وَلَمْ يُنْكَرْ عَلَى الْمَرْأَةِ قُعُودُهَا عِنْدَ الْقَبْرِ. That he didn't criticize her for sitting there. He didn't criticize her for sitting there. Clear? He said what? Fear Allah and be patient. So the scholars say he didn't criticize her for being there, but actually aqarraha. He approved of her being there. Clear? He didn't criticize her, he approved of her being there. And if he approves of something, then that means what? It's permissible. Clear? Tayyib? The Prophet ﷺ approve of something is a proof that it is allowed to do. Clear? Tayyib. What do the scholars say who disagree with them? What?
I actually don't know.
But tell me what you think they said.
Unless I'm misheard, I didn't hear hadith in a graveyard.
They're sitting at a grave.
Yeah, a grave, not a graveyard. But to a grave,
Tayyib.
one grave is not considered a graveyard.
Not necessarily. It doesn't have to be a graveyard.
Also, the argument
Like
is
when you
grave,
go,
period.
no, when you go, generally, when you go to a graveyard, you generally visit one grave at a time.
Yeah.
Right? You with me?
Yeah.
So how would she visit if you're trying to say that she wasn't in a graveyard?
No, what I'm saying, I was thinking maybe the opposing argument would be that doesn't prove that they were in the grave.
Oh, okay. I'm with you. Jade.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That one grave,
Right.
that could have been like outside her, it could have been, you know, well,
It could have been in somebody's backyard.
backyard.
Go
She
ahead.
can't go to my backyard.
Jade. We ain't getting into that. But let's just say this. It's good to take shots like that because you never know. It's good. It's good to think like that. But you want to see what the people of knowledge say. But if you thought like that and then if the scholars say that, it feels good. You on the right track thinking here. Huh? Yeah, that was part of our curriculum for the Ahkam al-Hadith in school. We used to have to read the Hadith and you pull from. Before we talk about what the scholar says, what you benefit from the Hadith? What does the Hadith prove? Before we read any further, like we're doing right now, before we read any further, we say this. What does the Hadith prove?
I would say from those who counter that would say because Prophet told the fear along the people, meaning that should have been at the grave.
Jade. Mumtaz. He argues that he's going to say that. He says, well, maybe the Prophet it did criticize her. That's why he told her to fear Allah and be patient. But that's not what they said. They said he didn't criticize her. He just told her fear Allah and be patient. So to the first group of scholars, the fact that the Prophet ﷺ said to the woman who was at the grave crying, the fact that he said fear Allah and be patient, to the first group of scholars, that doesn't to them, that's not a criticism. Okay? That's not a criticism. Fear Allah and be patient is not a criticism to the first group of scholars. So they say, the scholars who argue, they do say that. That's exactly what they say. So what do they say? They do not agree, number one, that the Prophet ﷺ agreed with her being there. They don't agree, right? They say, no, he did not approve of her being at the grave. How do they prove that? They say also, and he did criticize her for being there. Right? They say exactly the opposite of what the other scholars said. They say, how did he criticize her? He said, fear Allah and be patient. So to one group of scholars, fear Allah and be patient is not a criticism. And to the other group of scholars, fear Allah and be patient is a criticism. Clear? Are we arguing about the hadith being authentic or not? No, the hadith is authentic. We're arguing about the understanding of the hadith. Does the hadith prove that or not? There's a lot of issues like this, y'all. This is just one. This issue of the sisters visiting the graves is only one issue. It's a lot of issues like this. So, yeah. Oh yeah, Jazakallah khair. طيب. He says, and now this is what they do. The scholars who are arguing against this hadith where the woman was sitting there crying, they say the fact that the Prophet ﷺ commanded her to fear Allah, have taqwa. They say, well, amr bi taqwa, amr bi fi'l al-awamir wa tark al-nawahi. When a person says fear Allah, they're commanding you to be obedient and to stay away from the haram. Right? The command, fear Allah, akhi, or fear Allah, sister, ukhi. That means what? Be obedient to Allah and stay away from the haram. Okay? They say, and in this case, and this is, they say, and from staying away from the haram is not visiting the graves. Mushkila, Lana.
So would they say that? First question: is it permissible to cry at a grave? Being over.
Is it permissible to cry?
At the grave?
Yeah.
It is.
Hold time. Hold up, because I got a problem right here. This is the issue right here. Before we go to the crying at the grave, at the end, it says, they say he did criticize her. Why did he criticize her? He said, fear Allah and be patient. Then they say, well, amru bi taqwallah, amru bi fi'l al-awamir wa tark al-nawahi. When a person tells another person to fear Allah, that means you're telling them to obey Allah and stay away from disobedience. They say, and from disobedience is visiting the graves, for women visiting the graves. The problem with that is we haven't reached that conclusion yet that women visiting the graves is from disobedience. But they slid that in there to prove what they're trying to prove, to argue their point. You get it? We haven't come to a conclusion yet that right now we're debating. You can't use the issue that we're debating on to prove that the debate is true. You with me? They said from the haram things is women visiting the grave. Well, I can't agree with that. And that's why I said it's summarized, because I don't sell them. We can come back and say, well, I don't agree that women going because it's not finished yet. Everybody with me? Tell you. Yes, from what I know. Jay, you gotta say that. Oh, I gotta help you. Say that. You gotta say that again. Say that again. The sister can't hear you.
So you look at the evidence, right? What are we to look at?
Yeah, I say it over here. Thank you. They can't hear you, Shay. That's what I'm saying, man. All right. This one ain't gonna reach you.
This one ain't gonna reach.
Oh, it might reach, but you gotta bring it back. Don't pull nothing out, man. Okay. This is another argument.
So one of the arguments is this, right? Let's say, for example, the first question is it permissible for anyone to cry at the grave? So they say yes. It's permissible to cry at the grave. That's permissible. So you look at the hadith, and the alayhi salatu wasalam, he passed by the woman while she was crying at the grave. And he told her that fear Allah was for you. That's something that I was for you. So the argument that it's impermissible for women to visit the grave, why would we tell her that fear Allah is permissible to cry at the grave? Understand? Does that make sense? The point is this. For the argument that it's impermissible for women to visit the graves, that's a strong proof for them because he told her to fear Allah. And he told her to be patient, right? Why? What did she do wrong? She was at the grave and she was crying. That makes sense? So the crying is permissible while we tell her to fear Allah.
Yeah. You see, but you see how it can go? It can go back. We can ping pong it back and forth over and over and over. That's why I said this is summarized.
Hadith didn't say that.
Hadith didn't say that.
Inshallah. One of the parts of the study that we it would have said she was bleeding. It would have said something like that. But it didn't go exactly. Yes, it would have said
she was crying.
So it said crying. So the question now is it permissible to cry free? Yes.
Permissible to cry.
So why would you tell her you're wrong patient? And it was permissible for you.
And it goes back to what? Again, y'all, this is not the only issue like this, y'all. It's a bunch of issues. They go through the same pattern. You say, they say something, they bring a hadith, and they say, this is what the hadith means. This is what proves it. And then the other scholars argue and say, no, it doesn't mean that. Right now, we're talking about what the hadith means, not the actual authenticity of the hadith. Okay? So that was their second proof to prove that it's okay for women to go to the graveyard. And let's just recap real quick before we go to the third proof. They said the first proof were the first two hadith that are both in Sahih Muslim, where the Prophet ﷺ said, what? I prevented you from visiting the graveyards. And then he said, Fazuruha, but go ahead and visit him. He visited his mother's grave, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then he said, visit the grave. He said, visit the graves, it will remind you of death. And they say, the command to visit the graves was general, right? The other scholars argue and say, no, it can't be general because the wording used was masculine. And then they argue that. So then they went to another dalil. The other dalil was that what the Prophet ﷺ walked by a woman. She was at a grave. She was sitting there crying. He said to her, fear Allah and be patient. She told him, get away from me. She didn't know it was the Prophet ﷺ. Then she went to his house, right? She said, I didn't know it was you. And that's when he told her, patience is when the fitna first happens. When you first get tested with something, you first find out some news, right? That's what patience. Hold on, time out. Listen, what I'm saying, y'all. See, what they want to do is the long version, right? Which is cool. But I don't know if we're gonna do long version tonight.
That's what we add. And that also was the hadith was another proof that it can be counted the whole thing. Which can mean
to you. Oh, that's the argument. That's, I mean, so now we got this what it boils down to. Some scholars hold fear Allah and be patient as a criticism for her being there, and other scholars hold fear Allah and be patient. They don't hold it to be a criticism for her being there. Advice to her. Now, who's right and who's wrong? That's a whole nother, that's just the issue. That's the issue on the table. How can I say for sure it means that? In this case, we'll stop there. Their next dalil. You ready? Quick sister got a question? Huh? The next dalil is the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha. في قصة زيارة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لأهل البقيع. The Baqi' is Which graveyard is the Baqi'? In Al-Madinah. And who's buried at the Baqi'? The Sahaba. Many of the Sahaba are buried in the graveyard in Medina and the name of the graveyard is Al-Baqi'. So now this hadith is when the Prophet ﷺ visited the graveyard where many of the Sahaba were buried. طيب. وفيه أن جبريل عليه السلام جاء إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال إن ربك يأمرك أن تأتي أهل البقيع فتستغفر لهم. That Jibril alayhi salam, he came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he said, your Lord, Allah has commanded you to go to that graveyard where the Sahaba are and make istighfar, seek Allah's forgiveness for the Sahaba. طيب. قالت. So Aisha says, قلت كيف أقول لهم يا رسول الله. She said, well, what am I supposed to say when I go to the graveyard? Who said this? Who said this, sisters? I hope y'all listening. Aisha says, what am I supposed to say when I seek forgiveness for the Sahaba in the graveyard? What am I supposed to say? What's the dua? What is the dua that we say when we go to the graveyard and make dua for the deceased? Qala. The Prophet said, he said, Quli as-salamu ala ahli diyar min al-mu'mineen wal-muslimin. He taught her the dua to say when she went to that graveyard. Clear? How does that hadith prove it's okay for women to go to the graveyard? He told her to say it when she goes to the graveyard. Right? He said he taught her the hadith. He taught her the hadith, right, to say when she goes to make istighfar for the Sahaba at the graveyard, for the deceased. And this is what? Not is the hadith authentic or not. This hadith is in Sahih Muslim. So they're not arguing if the hadith is authentic. But how does the hadith prove it's okay? So they say, they say, the fact that she asked him, what do I say when I go to that graveyard? The graveyard, Al-Baqi' is a graveyard. Okay? So the fact that she asked him, what am I supposed to say when I go there? Like, what am I supposed to say? They say that's number one. He says, and number two, they say, Ta'lim al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam li hadha du'a. The fact that he taught her the dua to say also proves that it's allowed for the women to go to the graveyard. Clear? You have something to say? Everybody with me? So how does the hadith of Aisha prove that it's okay? Number one, the fact that she asked him what to say when she go there, right? He didn't tell her don't go. She asked him, and then he gave her an answer. He taught her the dua. He taught her the dua to say at the graveyard. So they say this proves that it's allowed for the women to go to the graveyard. How do y'all feel right now? Just want to know. I just want to know. It's pretty strong. How y'all feel about this, sisters? It's pretty strong. Huh? Strong or less, Sheikh? I'm not starting that. I'm giving, you know what I'm saying? We need to know this stuff so that when we see people do stuff that's foreign to us, we understand they have a hadith, authentic hadith from Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. They're not shooting from the hip. No matter what masjid they pray at. In this issue, when the women show up to the grave, we worried about what masjid they come from. We worry about what clothes they got on, who with them, what masjid. We're not looking at what dalil they have to do what they're doing. And what they're using is a hadith from Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim that we say we love, right? We say we love them. The hadith that they're using for their women to go to the graveyard is the hadith from Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. Does it mean, now what they're arguing is, what does the hadith mean? Well, they're arguing, well, listen, the Prophet ﷺ taught Aisha the dua to say when you go to the graveyard. Okay.
Aisha asked, what did she say in her when she asked it?
What did she say?
قالت
قالت كيف أقول لهم يا رسول الله. She said, what do I say to for them, Rasulullah? He said, خلاص. See? What do I say to him? He said, خلاص. She said, what do I say to him? And he taught her the dua. طيب. Now, they say what? Those two reasons prove that one, she asked him, and two, he sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he taught her the dua. So that shows it's permissible for him to go. They say la. It don't mean that. That hadith does not mean that. We can't agree with you that the hadith means that. They say why? They say that the hadith siqa li ta'lim as-salam ala ahl al-qubur. They say that the hadith was just it was an issue of teaching. It was just an issue of teaching what to say or the dua to say for the deceased. Just teaching the dua to say with the deceased. It doesn't necessitate that it's allowing you to go to the graveyard. He's teaching what to say, the dua for the deceased. It says, and because he taught her the dua to say for the deceased, لا يلزم من تعليم النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لعائشة ذلك الدعاء إباحة زيارة. It just because he taught her the dua to say, right, when you for the deceased, it doesn't necessitate that it's allowed for women to visit the graveyards. Why? Because it's possible. Their whole thing is women can't visit the graveyards. It's possible a woman is driving by a graveyard past the deceased and she makes dua for him. That's not an issue. The issue is not if a woman passes a graveyard. The issue is if a woman directly leaves to go and her intention is to go to a graveyard. So if she's driving and ride past the graveyard, that's not an issue. So maybe he was teaching her dua in case she walked by a graveyard and she wants to make the dua for the deceased. Just because he taught her, he said, no. Just because he taught her the dua doesn't necessitate that it's allowed. We can't just totally understand. They're saying that it's allowed for women to visit the graveyard based on that.
You asked him what to say when she go.
Yes. No. She said she asked him, what does she say for them?
That's what I asked earlier.
He said, what do you say for them? All right, put it all in context. Put it all in context. Man, listen. And this is the point. It's perception, a lot of it. It could be understood like this. It could be understood like that. Who's right? Right? He said that what? The hadith says that the Prophet ﷺ, he visited the graveyard, which is called Al-Baqi in Medina, with the Sahaba, many of the Sahaba there. Tayyib. And Jibreel alayhi salam came to the Prophet ﷺ and told him that Allah said, make dua for the deceased, right? At that graveyard, right? What's the name of the graveyard? Al-Baqi', just in case you go to Medina, right? You send and make dua for the Sahaba. So Aisha said to the Prophet ﷺ, قالت, كيف أقول لهم يا رسول الله? What do I say for them? What do I say for them? Say for who? The people in the grave. Now, They say, well, just because he taught her that doesn't mean it's allowed for her to go there. Maybe she's walking by the graveyard, she wants to make dua. That's their argument. Clear? Everybody clear? That's how they argue it. Which
He tell her what to say when she gets to it.
evidently, that's the point. The point, evidently, that's the whole point. That's the point, evidently. You understand how it goes? And again, it's a lot of issues that go like this. But this is how they go through the issues. And again, they stop right there, but we can go back and forth. They can go back and forth with that in the longer discussions. All of this is under the first position. How many positions is it? 3. This is all the first position that is allowed. So yeah, we might have to do the other positions another day, possibly. I mean, we already. So yeah, the fourth dalil to say what? To say that it's allowed for women to visit the grave.
I'm gonna say, how about you, Jalil, that said the second position, you start a little bit.
No, we gotta smash everything with the permissibility. Yes. No, don't forget. You didn't forget. I think you got them, inshallah. We can read all of Dalil again when we get done. All right. So yeah, the fourth proof that they have more than one Dalil, y'all. The first Dalil they had was actually 2 hadith. Then the second Dalil was another hadith. Then the third Dalil was another hadith. This is the fourth Dalil, which is the 5th hadith that is used for what? Women going to the graveyard at a janazah. The problem we have is what we talked with what I said in the beginning. We see women at a janazah standing out there, shake they shot out, man. Why they got the women here? Keep stay over there, and they people screaming at them. They screaming at non-Muslims. Non-Muslims don't even know what's going on. Screaming, y'all gotta stay over there. I ain't coming. Some of the sisters don't know what's going on. Brothers screaming and right, starting calling people names, and start putting rulings on people, calling them bid'ah, calling them innovators. They ain't on the minhaj, and everything else that goes with that. Allah Mustaan. And this is the 5th dalil. Now, this is the 5th hadith that they have to prove that it's okay for them to go. Tayyib? And this hadith, where is this? Remember, the first dalil had 2 hadith, right? Where he left it general. The wording was general. It was 2 hadith. Then the second dalil was he saw the woman sitting by the grave crying, right? That was the second, which was really, they categorize it as the second dalil, but that's really the 3rd hadith. Then the 3rd dalil, which is really the 4th hadith, was the one about Aisha when he taught her, radiallahu anha, he taught her the dua to make for the deceased, right? When he was visiting the Baqir. Now this is the next dalil, which is the 5th hadith. The 5th hadith that the people who say it's allowed for women to visit the graves use to prove that it's permissible. The hadith, he says, ما رواه عبد الله ابن أبي مليكة عن أن عائشة رضي الله عنها أقبلت ذات اليوم من المقابر. He saw Aisha, she was coming from the graveyard. طيب. He says, فقلت لها. He said, I said to her, يا أم المؤمنين من أين أقبلت? He said, oh mother of believers, Aisha, where are you coming from? There's a lot of hikmah in these hadith. He didn't assume nothing, he asked her. Even though it looked like you're coming from over there, where are you coming from? She could have been coming from somewhere else and just, where are you coming from? قالت, Aisha said, من قبر أخي عبد الرحمن ibn Abi Bakr. She said, I'm coming from the grave of my brother, Abd al-Rahman, the son of Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu. He says, فقلت لها, I said to her, أليس رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم نهى عن زيارة القبور? Didn't the Prophet ﷺ prohibit it from visiting the graves? She said, نعم. Yeah, he did. Then she said, كان نهى ثم أمر بزيارتها. He used to prevent the visit of the graves, and then he commanded to visit the graves. This is what Aisha said. How does this go strong, eh? MashaAllah. They said now, how does that prove that it's okay for women to visit the graves? They said that Aisha, she understood that the women were included in that general allowance to go visit the graves. After, they say what? At first she said worse. Yes, he used to prevent. He used to say, no, don't visit the graves, right? Just like the Prophet said in the other hadith. She understood that, okay, That's why she said, yes, he used to prevent us from visiting the graves. And then he allowed the visiting of the graves. So she understood their wedge. How does that prove anything? It says Aisha understood that the women entered into that general allowance for women to visit the graves. That's their wedge. That's how they use that hadith. Yes.
He asked, how he asked her, did the Prophet prevent the women or just prevent us?
He said prevent us. He left it general. And this hadith is general. It says, didn't he prevent? Where is it? It says, "Alaysa Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam naha an ziyarat al-qubur." Didn't he prevent from visiting the graves? Like he said in the other hadith, I used to prevent you from visiting the graves, and it was general. She said, yes, he did. And then he commanded to visit the graves, and she understood from that everybody was included. This is who? Aisha radiallahu anha. What do the other scholars say? Of course they don't agree with that, y'all. Of course. They don't agree with that. And this is how it goes. They say, and they went a little further in this issue right here. They say that Aisha, what does the hadith say first so we make sure we're on the same page? Aisha was coming from where? The grave of her brother. The person in the hadith asked her, where are you coming from? She said, what? First, he saw her coming from the direction of the graveyard. And then he didn't just see that, he asked her, where are you coming from? And she said, from the grave of my brother, Abdurrahman ibn Abi Bakr, right? They say, the people who argue that, the other scholars, they say, Aisha was not coming from the graveyard. She was coming from Mecca, making Hajj. She was coming from making Hajj. And they say what? She was coming from making Hajj and she just happened to marrat. She just happened to pass by the graveyard. Y'all ain't feeling that? Sisters? Jade. We're gonna get to it. Jade. All this is the argument. This is what their argument. She was making Hajj and she happened to pass by the graveyard. Now, everybody gotta remember, it's no problem if a woman drives by or walks past a graveyard. That's not an issue. The issue is if a woman, for example, leaves out of her house to go visit a grave. That's what we're talking about. They say it's permissible. Why? Aisha, this is one of the reasons. Aisha said what she said in the hadith. Like they're saying, no, she was making Hajj and she just happened to walk past the graveyard. And if that's the case, if she just walked past the graveyard, la bas. That's no problem for a woman to just walk past the graveyard, make dua for the deceased and things like that. So yeah, the other scholars, they argue them back now, which they didn't pull this up in the previous. Now they argue them back. And you see how I can go back and forth? No disrespect. No disrespect. This is all with ihtiram, with respect. No disrespect to you, but we can't take that. You're saying she came from Hajj. So now the ones who argue back, they say that the hadith doesn't say she was coming from Hajj. Nothing in that hadith shows that she was making Hajj. Did y'all hear anything in the hadith that shows they were making Hajj? Nothing. And that's what they say. The lafz of the hadith, the wording of the hadith, la yusa'id ala dhalik, doesn't prove what you're saying. Nothing says about her making Hajj or something like that. But it says, أنها أقبلت من المقابر. She was coming from the graveyard, the direction of the graveyard, right? And that proves, it says, now, this is arguable, but they say, the fact that she was coming from the graveyard, they say, يدل على أنها قصدتها, proves that she intentionally went to the graveyard, right? فثبت من فعلها وقولها أنها فهمت أن النساء داخلات في الإذن كالرجال. So they say it's understood from what Aisha said and what she did, her actions and her statements, that she understood that it was permissible for women to go to the graveyard. How y'all feel about that? This is just the first opinion, y'all. We didn't get to the opinion of it's not the ones who say it's haram for them to go. We didn't get there. All of this is the dalil. All of these proofs. How many hadiths do they have to prove it, y'all? 5 hadith. What do these hadith that say they use it for what? The permissibility of women visiting the graves. Do the scholars differ? The scholars differ. Are they different on the authenticity of the hadith? No. What are they different on? The understanding of the hadith. What does the hadith mean? Does the hadith include women? Does the hadith prove that women are allowed to go? The Salafi position. Allahu Alam. The Salafi position is. I don't know what the Salafi position is. Allahu Alam. Crazy.
I got a question for more points. For years, been able to talk that, you take one hadith and that's it, it's proof. You bar against that, bar against proof.
If you argue against,
Are you statements of that will need for some people that will need to say that maybe one hadith and that's my method, or that's my or whatever. But they use, I understand the context of that statement, but they use that as like you say how you gonna bring it, you better rock.
And use that one hadith statement to do it.
Yeah.
I think what's understood by that is that not in the hadith, not using the evidence from the hadith to make a point. It has to.
that what? If I bring you a hadith, you have to accept it? Or one hadith?
One hadith. And they don't, they don't confuse people, but they think you bring something counter, you kind of saying,
No, but this is the thing, y'all. Nobody from Ahlul, and Ahlul, the people of knowledge don't. Those are regular people. Like, I'm not calling out the body specific. People who don't know what they're talking about will say anything. The scholars of Islam don't make a hukum on one hadith. You have to do, like, you have to include everything surrounding the issue. Number one, you have to know what the issue is from the beginning, not just the khilaf. What's the issue we're talking about? Number one, the ayat. If there are ayat connected to the issue, are there hadith connected to the issue? What's understood? You have to know all of that before you can say this is it or not. The fact that you hear one hadith, yeah, we accept authentic hadith. But what if it's two authentic hadith and they seem to contradict each other? Then what? They seem to contradict each other. What happens then? You got to take this authentic hadith. What about this authentic hadith? I don't know. What's the strongest proof? That's a whole nother. Further.
You never see it in the way.
You don't? Yeah, because generally they follow the position that it's not allowed in that country. In that area, they follow the position that it's not allowed for women to go to the graveyard. But you might go to another country and there's a bunch of women at the graveyard. And that means what? To some people, to some people they are. The whole country, right? The whole country made a mistake. The whole Muslim country that's on paper as a Muslim country, and they have an official madhab that they follow, right? Because if you look up a Muslim country, y'all, it may tell you Islam and it'll tell you the madhab if they have an official madhab on paper. Like, so this is the position of who, y'all? Imam Abu Hanifa. That's the position. And some of the Imam Malik scholars, some of the Shafi'i scholars, and some of the Hanbali scholars. Riwayah and the Hanabila. We'll do that. Inshallah. We got to stop there, y'all. This is overkill for me. I don't know about y'all. Allahu Akbar. Mashallah. Sisters, any questions?
When they bring a proof to prove their point, and a scholar wants to debunk his way of understanding that hadith, can they just say, can they just make a statement to debunk it, or they have to also bring proof to debunk that?
Yeah, everything is based on the law. You can't, it's not emotional. No,
yeah. Like, for example, you know, with Aisha, where Aisha said, look what I said.
Yes.
People that scholars would counter that, say he was teaching her the hadith. How she, go back. Where's the proof that that's what his intention is?
Well, where's the proof? It's all at this point, when it comes to the wedge, it's about fahm. Now, the proof could be in a couple different things. The proof could be in the language. It could be in the Arabic language. The Arabic language proves this. They might have proof, the one that's arguing might have proof in the Arabic language too, in the same hadith. Like that's which is not, usul al-fiqh is not in here, but that's why I skipped some of it, because it's like, it would just be like, it wouldn't really, I don't know, it might be, can't get out what I'm trying to say, but some of it is connected to the language. Nothing is just haphazard. Nothing is just, no, I'm just not going to agree with you. No, we get emotional like that. No, they from down, I ain't taking it. But they got a hadith. They don't have no hadith. No, the scholars, the hadith is clear. The scholars, they're going to tell you this. And they might bring another hadith from somewhere else that proves what they're saying. Or they might just argue your understanding. We're arguing what you understand. You understood from that, A. But you know how some things, you know how we say some things in English and they can carry multiple meanings? Cool, it's the same idea. What do you have to prove that this hadith only means what you're saying? Well, that's what you have. Okay, but I'm saying, based on what I'm reading in front of me, what I know, it doesn't mean that. It doesn't look like that. It means this. And we're looking at the same hadith.
Scholar also do that, like, a scholar brings a proof for what he thinks something is or means or whatever, and another scholar says, what proof do you have to say that that's what it means? As a counter, just like that. When scholars do that as terms of academics. But they have to prove.
Do they have a proof do they need a proof for their proof? No. Do they need a proof for their understanding?
No, what say that, Ali says, this is, how that would be the proof.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just say, as a scholar, can I just say rebuttal by asking what's his proof for his understanding of it? Or I have to bring a proof to denounce his
Jade, what's your proof for the understanding? Yeah, that's what I said. What's your proof for the wedge of istilal, right? Yeah, that's gonna go back to usul. That's gonna go back to they call it extracting from the text. What in the text? And so a lot of times, it's connected to the Arabic language. It's connected to the sentence structure in the Arabic language. It could be proof from outside of their hadith, but a lot of times, like in school, when we had a hadith ahkam, we read a hadith, for example, like the hadith where the woman was crying by the grave, right? So say, for example, we use that hadith and we're taking that hadith, and after we read the hadith, the Prophet told us, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told her to fear Allah and be patient. She didn't know who he was. Somebody told her who he was. She went to his house. He told her that patient is to be at the beginning of the fitna. Stop right there. Right? Okay, what does the hadith prove? Before we go any further, what does the hadith prove? No, this is the exercise. This is the class itself. What does the hadith prove? Just looking at this. Don't bring me nothing of another hadith. Don't bring another hadith into it. Only using the text in front of you. And when you restrict yourself to the text in front of you, you have to understand the language of the text. You have to understand the Arabic. You have to understand what does this point to in the language of Arabic, in the Arabic language. So you might be able to pull another hadith to support this hadith, but we don't want a hadith to support. Right now we're talking about this text in front of us, or this ayat in front of us. What in this ayat shows that something is obligatory? You with me? What in this ayat shows that something is sunnah? You have to be able to pull it. That's why they say extract the rule and pull it out. You have to be able to look at that text and specify what proves what you're saying in this text, right? Now, it's not that you're restricted, but that's the exercise. The exercise is that. Overall, the scholars use everything surrounding the issue. But in that case, my proof is here inside of the hadith. Now, you could disagree or agree, but that's how it goes. That's a scholar of a high level, not us, meaning myself or other people. These are people who are mujtahideen, and that's a whole discussion of the high level of scholarship that you would need to be able to do that. The tulab al-ilm, the students of knowledge, are people hopefully taking the road to scholarship. They're people who are working their way up, but they still have a heavy reliance on the understanding of the scholars that came before them. But what are they doing? They're taking the tools. The talib ilm is supposed to be gathering the tools to be able to do what the scholars do. Clear? To be able to look at the text without looking at an explanation and say, okay, well, it says here such and such. Well, this points to that. And the ulama understand this is the principle. Da, 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 da. The bag of tools. You know how a plumber comes and he got a bag of tools and he does the work? The talib ilm is like, you got to have a bag of tools, which is the different sciences. Fiqh, usul al-fiqh, mustalah hadith, ahadith, ahkam, ayat, ahkam. You're supposed to have all of that. So when you look at it, you can test your knowledge. And then you can go back and see what the scholars of Islam said about it. You might be right in your assessment, and you might be wrong. But that's the process. Everybody, this is not for everybody saying something is halal and haram.
What about when it comes to I'm that regular people taking a position for themselves? So, they see it the real, they assess it, they say, for themselves, they don't say, this is the correct
Right.
position. They think, I believe that this is, I can't do this. This is how I understand this.
A general Muslim, a regular Muslim, generally, they read a book, and the book says such and such is halal. Like a lot of the books we have, even in the book we're doing on Wednesday, even in the end of important lessons for every Muslim, right? It's a section on the janazah prayer. And in the section, it says the same thing about the women. It's not permissible for the women to visit the graves, right? So a general Muslim is going to read that, and they're going to say, okay, I read here that it says it's not allowed for women to visit the graves, and this is why. They're going to read in here why, and they may live their life like that. Alhamdulillah. There's no problem. There's no problem. But it may be another Muslim who reads another book, and it says what we're talking about tonight, and they live their life like that.
Well, for example, the person reads that hadith, right?
Uh-huh.
And they think that the way that the hadith is, or the proof that's brought forward to prove this point, it doesn't seem strong to them, even though they're laymen.
Right.
But they have not to say, I need more to, to take this position, or can they have to take it as is because they're laymen?
They read a hadith or they read an explanation, and the explanation doesn't seem strong to them.
To the point, not the hadith. No, the hadith.
Yeah, the explanation of the hadith doesn't seem strong to them, right? They have something else to go on.
Yeah.
If they don't have anything else, what are they going to do? If it gets to that point, the best thing to do is to start asking, seeking knowledge about it. Because a lot of times, y'all, and I'll tell you this, and this happened to me numerous times, a lot of times it's difficult. If you just translating stuff like verbatim, you translate, like if you were to translate some of this stuff verbatim in English, it might not make sense to the reader. That happened to me more than once. I'm reading a book in English, I don't understand how that fits. It don't make sense. How does that ayat prove that? In English, it didn't make sense to me. It doesn't mean in Arabic it don't make sense. It doesn't mean the scholar came with something from the left field, but in English, what I'm reading in front of me, it doesn't make sense. You with me? So it could be just the issue. It could be overworded. It could be a lot of things. But if it gets like that, then it's important to start asking questions and get further clarity. Don't just leave it like that and you don't have anything else to go on.
Just the example you brought back the book, I go back to my problem earlier. Like, that brother must be lying. Y'all always mention sometimes that there may be different things, right? Certain in the book. But you go to certain places, it's not talked to. It's like, this is it. So the general name that he's going to think this is it. So if I see something counter, automatically in mind is I need to leave, or I need to make enough, or to stay. Things like this. What I'm saying, that's definitely the danger is they take one position, they take one hadith, they say they're one, two hadith, it's all true.
The teacher has a responsibility. Teachers have responsibilities. If you don't know the issue, it's better not to talk about it, not to discuss the issue. You would be better as far as better than confusing people, is to say Allahu A'lam. There's no shame in not knowing. There's no shame in saying I don't know. If you're teaching people that it's a one-way issue and it's not a one-way issue, you're gonna cause confusion, like we already been having. There's gonna be confusion, and it's gonna cause people, because a lot of times people react and they carry stuff the way their teacher presents it, whoever the teacher is.
Minhajfication of fit. That's what I call it.
Who?
The minhajfication of fit.
Minhajfication.
They'll make a fit on minhaj issue.
Oh yeah, Saajid. Yeah, that's the issue too. The teacher might not know. Teacher shouldn't be teaching. The teacher might not know, y'all. The teacher might not know it's the different. It's khilaf and it's deep and it's all of this wajh loud. The teacher teaching the issue might not know it like that. So what do? They give the basic. That's it. Now, even if they did that, even if they taught what they know, you can't make it. The problem is you teaching something and you don't know it's khilaf. That's a problem. Because now the people leave there like we did. We leave. I know I did. I went to Saudi thinking it was a one-track thing, and everybody in Saudi. When I got to Mecca, everybody in the masjid wasn't practicing the sunnah to me. These people in the land of Tawheed, and they don't even know what the sunnah is. That's what I thought. Ignorant, right? Because I thought it was one way that I was told, and that was it. There can't be no other way. It has to be like this. If it's not like this, then there must be some. Even if a person doesn't say it, it's about presentation. You can present it. And the way you're presenting it as if there is no other way. There's nothing else to say about this. And then the people get up and they understand that and they live their lives like that. And that's a problem for the teacher. The teacher has a responsibility to know when to stop. The teacher's responsible. You got to carry that. And they're going to wear that Yom Kippur. That's why if you don't know, then it's better just to stay away from that. Any questions from the sisters? So we got the proof, the first position that is permissible for the women to visit the graves. They got 5 ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. 4 of them are found in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. One of them, the last one is in, I think, Al-Hakim. وأخرجه ابن ماجه. طيب. It says here. قال البيهقي في المجمع. طيب. They have 5 hadith to prove, and that they use to prove that it's allowed for women to visit the graves. Inshallah, next Friday we'll continue with the second position, the second opinion, which is that it is haram. It's not allowed for women to visit the graves. That's the second position, which means that if tahrim means that if women are visiting the graves, to them it's a sin. It's sinful. The first one that is allowed. We finished the one that says it's allowed. The second position is that if the women is haram, if something is haram, that means it's a sinful act and it deserves Allah's punishment. Allah could forgive them, but it's deserving of Allah's punishment. Inshallah, we'll do the second one next week. Unless the sisters have any questions, we'll stop. Inshallah. The sisters, all right, follow. Who was that? The first hadith? The first 2? Oh, hadith Burayda. Burayda radiallahu anhu. Burayda. خلاص يا أخوات. The sister's good. طيب. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.